21 on CJAD 800. I'm Matt Gilmour sitting in for Aaron Rand today on Montreal Now. Just a couple of text messages that have been coming in since our last conversation with that pet store owner who's now facing fines if she doesn't find new products that have French on the labels. Some of these products don't actually exist in French only. You have to wonder, says this one texter, if the CAQ wants all small businesses to fail here in Quebec. Bill 96 is mostly an exercise in taking away people's rights in general. And another texter who writes in saying, I'm a French Canadian and don't agree with the OQLF's their abuse and insignificant tactics, hiding behind an ideology, how to dismantle or restrain the OQLF's power. And one person says, hey, even kitty litter and dry food for cats are delivered free by Amazon, so consumers will just go there for those products. Sticking with language regulations, the CAQ government recently tabled a bill that would force streaming giants like Netflix and Spotify to boost French language content by setting quotas. If it's passed, the law would enshrine in the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms the right to access French language cultural content. Fair enough, but will it work? Michael Geist is an internet law expert at the University of Ottawa and joins me now. Michael Geist, hello.
Hi.
Michael, you told our colleagues in a recent interview with CTV Montreal that you see this bill as a solution in search of a problem. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, no, well, I think in some ways the outcomes of this legislation are going to be similar to what you just described in terms of reduced consumer choice. But there are several elements that are worth focusing on in that regard. In terms of a solution in search of a problem, the notion that it's hard to find French language content on some of these streaming services, I frankly think just runs directly counter to the experience of anyone who actually goes on these platforms. You know, if you go, for example, on a service like Netflix, quite literally at the very top, there is a choice of which language do you want in terms of the programming that you're going to see. And so it makes it very easy to find that content. It literally requires nothing more than clicking a single icon.
Quebec's culture minister, Mathieu Lacombe, when he was introducing the bill, said that of the 10,000 most streamed songs in Quebec in 2023, only about 5% were French language titles from this province. Is that not is that not an issue that's perhaps worth addressing?
Well, I mean, I would say that the audio and the film side may be somewhat different. But I think what's core here is that we have seen a change in the way these services function. You know, it used to be that you had quotas, let's say, on the radio, and so that ensured that a certain amount of content was available or was being aired. It's different when users get their own choices. And I suppose the question is are those numbers a function of recommendations that are coming from Spotify, or does that simply reflect the interests of users? And the services themselves have no reason to limit people's access to content in whatever language or whatever kind of content they're looking for. Their whole business model is premised on people paying monthly subscription fees that they can walk away from at any time. And they pay those fees because presumably there is the kind of content that they're interested in and they want to continue to watch or listen to. And so this isn't like a traditional broadcaster that may have some competing objectives, and regulation played a role in ensuring what they aired at a given point in time, given sort of the scarcity of availability during a programming schedule. There is no scarcity here. There's an unlimited amount of content. And once you start saying, well, we want to dictate what people see, or even more through the quota system that the minister has suggested, reduce the amount of, let's say, English language content or non-French content on those services, I think that raises some real concerns.
Speaking with internet law expert Michael Geist about this issue, what could the government do actually? What would it look like in practice for these quotas to be put in place? Because, I mean, there are an infinite number of songs or titles like on Netflix. Like, it's almost impossible to actually check to see how many there are. Like, what could they practically do to set these quotas?
Well, they can set a quota, and they've indicated that's what they intend to do with the legislation. So we can just pick a number. Let's say they want 30% of the library on Netflix to be French language content. Note that they haven't said that should be Quebec-based content. So in theory, They may not have resulted in a single additional Quebec film or television show, merely French language shows. But let's say they say it's 30%. What Netflix will do, I think, is one of two things. One, they'll simply say, this market just isn't worth the cost, the additional cost of obtaining these sorts of licenses, reducing the kind of value of our service to many of the other users isn't worth the trouble, and so we're just going to block access within the Quebec market. Alternatively, they may say, okay, we'll comply, but in order to meet that percentage, what they are undoubtedly going to do is remove content. They're going to have to remove some of the English language and foreign language content to get to that 30%. Because it's not an unlimited library, but it's a pretty big one. And in order to hit whatever that percentage is, part of it's going to be the result of increasing the amount of French language content, but part of it is going to come from reducing the amount of non-French content so you hit the desired percentage. That means people will see less or have less choice as a result of this kind of regulation.
I wonder if the Quebec government has ever heard of a VPN.
Well, of course, I mean, people will look for ways to circumvent. In some ways, that's a little bit back to the future, because in the early days of Netflix, Canadians often used VPNs.
Yeah.
The library that was available was so much better in the United States. But, if Netflix links this directly to billing addresses, even a VPN won't necessarily save you if the company says that what they're going to do is block users from the province altogether.
Right. That's a good point. I do want to ask you very quickly, though, about the impact that these streaming services have had on, basically the content creation in Canada generally. I think something that I've thought a little bit about is one of the reasons perhaps why the French language broadcasters in Quebec are so much stronger still than their English counterparts in the rest of Canada is because there is less content on these streaming platforms for Francophone audiences to go to. And that keeps them coming back to the French language content that's produced here in Quebec on Radio Canada, on TVA, and some of these other Télé-Québec, these types of, platforms. There's more of an audience there. And I wonder if, creating more competition coming from these American streaming platforms or European streaming platforms, could actually have an impact on the content creation that's going on some of the more traditional broadcasters here.
Well, I think there has been an impact, but it's been a positive one. If we take a look over the last number of years at the amount of content that is being created in Canada, there is record amount of spending, both in terms of what's called foreign language service production, so foreign location service production rather, so production that takes place that doesn't qualify strictly as Canadian content but is filmed here in Canada, as well as certified Canadian content. And here's a news flash. Much of that is funded by the streamers themselves. So you get companies like Netflix, a good example is they funded the movie Jusqu'à des Clans, filmed in Quebec with a Quebec-based crew in French. Everything about it is Quebec-based, but it doesn't qualify as CanCon because they happen to own it. And so, in fact, the streamers have injected huge amounts of additional spending, hundreds of millions of dollars, in film and TV production here in Canada. We are one of the top 3 places for Netflix to produce content anywhere in the world.
Michael Geist, internet law expert at the University of Ottawa. Thank you so much for this.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. 3:30, your news is next.